My name's Dave DeBow, founder of MoneyPartnerFormula.com, and this show is built for everyday real estate investors who are actively doing deals and looking to scale using other people's money. So if you're an active real estate investor and you want to get featured on this show to talk about your own real estate and capital raising experiences, then just go to daveinterviewsyou.com. Now let's get rolling with this episode, and remember to subscribe for daily interview content. Hey, gang, welcome back. Today's zooming in from Brooklyn, New York. We have an artistic guy, Aaron Yassin, who also applies that artistic value and skill set towards real estate investing. In fact, Aaron's big into kind of ground up condo developments, condo construction, and with a big focus on design in a very, very expensive market. So I'm really excited to kind of dive into how we can really drive up the value of our properties with design. So Aaron, welcome to the call. Great to have you.
So great to be here, Dave. Really appreciate you having me on your fantastic podcast.
Well, thank you very much. So Aaron, tell us a little bit about what your business looks like, your real estate investing business looks like, and what you guys do a little bit differently than other people.
Okay, so we're great way to start. We are focused on as you mentioned, ground up development, condominium constructions. And in New York City, as you might be able to imagine, that often involves a demolition component to the project. It's a very dense urban environment, and so there's a lot that's been built on most properties. So we're starting there, and there's certainly there's a process, obviously a very involved process, multi-layered process. Certainly not for the faint of heart
Oh
to jump
God, I can
into.
only imagine. So Aaron, how long have you been doing this for, you and your team?
Well, with my team, we've been working together for a few years at this point, but I've been involved in real estate in the New York City area for a couple of decades. I've done other work during that period as well, and it's been in the last 6 years or so that I've really been shifting full time into focusing on this niche with some other development projects that I've also been working on to really try to combine my skill sets, some different skill sets, and really focus them.
Very, very cool. All right. So you're building condominiums from scratch. Are these projects like complete demolitions and then you just
Correct.
starting from,
Yes.
okay. Yeah. Because I
Yes.
was
So it's
looking at the site, at your website, and you have some lovely buildings in there. And I was impressed with how they're modern, yet they still fit in with their surroundings, with the other older buildings around them. So I was curious as to whether you were kind of modifying existing buildings or just tearing them down and going right up
new.
from
Yes,
the ground up.
it's new construction. But I mean, what you're pointing to there, there's a term for it in kind of architectural terminology. It would be contextual design, where there's a thinking about how the building looks. And typically, again, in dense urban environments, you're looking at facades, whether it's one or two, depending if there's a corner to the building, in looking at the streetscape as well to see how that can fit into the context.
Into the
Which
context. Yeah.
it and there's definitely different ways of approaching it, and it depends on where the property is and what that context is. And I definitely see value in thinking that way.
So Aaron, just out of curiosity, are all of your projects like build to sell projects, or do you do any build to rent type projects
I,
as well?
I have done build to rent, but at the moment, definitely focused on the build to sell. And it's just that from an underwriting standpoint, it creates a shorter kind of life cycle for the project, and then there's a clear exit that you're trying to get to. There's, just for people listening, obviously there's some issues there because depending on how many apartments you're selling, you have to have that many transactions effectively to get out of the project as opposed to completing the construction, leasing it up, and then refinancing it. So definitely a different approach, but there's also a different end user in mind with the types of projects that we're doing.
Just to give us an idea, and every deal is different, obviously, but what's kind of the price range of the projects, the typical type project that you guys work on?
I mean, I can give you some metrics
Yeah.
for New York City, right? Just a range, because I'm sure this
Yeah.
would be interesting. A lot of people aren't working in New York City. Um, the range for acquisition sites on the lower end to for a property that you would want to reasonably
Yeah. In a
develop on.
neighborhood that you would want to be in. I
Yeah, I
get
mean,
it.
if it's too low, I mean, there's some potential. If it's a very large site, you might be able to do a certain type of rental building. Those projects are actually going on, and there's some large ones, and those would be in the, let's say, in the $100 to $200 price per buildable square foot range. So you're kind of talking about that sort of on the lower end, and then that can go up even to six, seven, $800 for really premium sites in New York City. That higher end, you're really looking at very, very expensive locations. And then typically we're looking around the 200 to 50, maybe 300 price per buildable square foot. So it's going to be based on the zoning of the property, of the lot, and how much you can build on that site. And then from there, you'll have a combination, which you'll have on other, under in your typical underwriting in your capital stack. You've got your hard costs, soft costs, interest reserve, closing costs, kind of the typical breakdown. From a hard cost standpoint, it's challenging to build in New York City. So certainly the price per square foot is going to be higher than in most markets. And at this point, we're really underwriting projects at around $400 a square foot for the hard cost, really on the average and slightly lower end. And then of course, there are much higher end projects that really exceed that price point. And then there's a percentage of that then from there for the soft costs and the other line items. So you're really
The
looking
other
at,
question I'd have for you, Aaron, because I can only imagine how much red tape you guys have to go through to to do a project, but give us just kind of an idea of how long does it usually take between finding the right property, getting it under contract, getting it purchased, demolitions, permitting, design, the whole bit, like A to Z or A to Z. How long does that typically take you?
yeah, that's really a great question. And this is really one of the most challenging points because time is money when you're doing development work, right?
Yeah.
So it's a give and take. How quickly can you try to move versus, what challenges you might have because, certain things in the planning stages maybe weren't done as well as they could have been, right? But for plans, depending on the size of the project, you're going to often try to get your plans together fairly quickly. Again, on a bigger project where there's more involved, you'll take more time to do it. And then you, of course, can try to get a property kind of tied up in contract where you're not putting out money, knowing that you're going to close and work on your plans before you close. That's kind of an ideal structure if you can work with a seller, and sometimes that's possible. From the point at which your plans are filed, a lot of people find this surprising that in New York City, it's possible to get plans approved in 5, 6, 7 months. Doesn't always happen, but it's possible. And for demolition, it's a separate filing. So you can get started on the demolition before you have the new building application approved. So you can try to stagger these things out, but there's so many different points at which you need to do things. There's always just gaps that are happening.
Yeah.
Is this done? Can you then start this? When does this come? Lead times, ordering materials, getting inspections, getting subcontractors in, overlapping schedules. It's a lot of different moving pieces that need to be kept in some degree of organization while you're working. Often job sites like this and projects like this are referred to as organized chaos.
So give us an example, maybe, Aaron, your last fully completed project from start to finish, how long did that take?
So we have a project that's on the market at the moment.
Yeah.
And from the point when we started the demolition to the point where we started marketing it was a couple of years.
So like 2 years. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
yes, about 2 years. And I would say that it took a little longer than I was hoping. It's not an unusual amount of time.
yeah,
And then there's going to be a period there's a period for sales also, and we're in the sales cycle and also completing the project at the moment as well. Just the final details. So for a smaller project, I would tend to underwrite it at around 30 months.
yeah.
And then as they start getting a little bit larger, 32, 36 months, and reasonably, again, depending on some of that runway that you might have to get started, you should be able to get a reasonable size project that would be, I would say, 20 to 40,000 square feet built in 36 months.
Very cool.
Doesn't always work out.
Of course not.
There's lots of stalled projects out there. There's various things that happen. There's a lot of risk. There's no question about it.
Absolutely. So, Aaron, let's talk about what your favorite thing, which is the
Yes,
whole
design,
design side of
design,
things.
design.
So I think
Yes,
that's kind of your special sauce. That's what you guys bring to the table. That's a little bit different than a lot of other developers that are just looking to get in and get out and crank out a building. You focus a lot on design. Tell us a little bit about how that came to be, and more importantly, how you've seen that design actually does drive up the value of a property.
okay, great question. I'll just give you, in summary, I'm an artist. My background is in fine art. I've been to art school a couple of times. I have a BFA and an MFA, and I've simultaneously worked doing a lot of construction work and doing a lot of design work and design integration work and working with a lot of architects and designers. So I have a very strong background. Also done some design services. So this has really it's a very intrinsic part of who I am to
Right.
think from a design standpoint and kind of lead with it. So it's definitely, it's a critical factor in how I think about a project. What can you actually do with it? But to step back from there for a second, it's important to realize that everything in the world is designed, right?
Mhm.
No matter what it is that you're looking at, you're wearing a baseball cap, that's someone's designed that. The shirt that I'm wearing, someone has designed. So there's just a question of evaluating that quality of design. Anything that anyone's buying, renovating, doing a value add, there's lots of design decisions that are being made. If you can really focus on a vision for what that is. And I definitely have, through a lot of thought in what I've been doing for a while, I have a lot of focus on how I think about it. But when you can do that, you can really understand how you can create certain kinds of spaces and how those spaces have an experience that is felt by people that walk into the spaces and then are interested in living in the buildings, right? It's a whole
So it's not
architectural
just the facade
experience.
of the building, it's not just how it looks on the outside. You're talking about the design of the
Absolutely.
interior as well, correct? The whole thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And really, when you look at the whole process, everything's designed, right? And
Yeah.
it all has to be considered, right? Because you're working with other consultants that are doing design work as well. There's a structural engineer, there's structural design, there's mechanical design. There's lots of layers to the design process, and really trying to think through those different layers to put together the building in a way where you end up with spaces that just feel different, right? That have a certain quality, that feel thoughtful. And that's really the focus. How can the spaces really feel thoughtful, like that the design details were thought through? And really, when you go and see a minimalist building, right? Something where there's minimal design details, those are the hardest ones to actually build, to
Huh.
get all the details to fit together so that you're not paying attention to them, that they
Mhm.
kind of disappear. So you have some clarity in the space, whether it's a rectilinear space or whether there's some other organic aspect to the space. there's a lot of challenges to actually get to that point. So when you're starting from that point and you're trying to fit everything together into it, it's a very holistic approach. And thinking holistically, then that also addresses people that are living in the building or visiting the building and their experience. How do they feel when they walk, when they come home, right? What does their home look like, right? What's the feeling when they open the door to the building and they walk into it? Of course, we're doing multiple story buildings, so there's a lobby, a small lobby. What does that feel like? What's the transition from there, to their apartment? And then what do the spaces in their apartment feel like? And there's a lot of details that have to come together. And thinking through all those details and really getting them to work together just creates a very different kind of experience for someone living in a
Well, maybe
building.
maybe help me by painting a bit of a picture for us here. Like compare and contrast one of your buildings to just more of a boring, typical
Great,
condo
great.
type
Yes,
building.
great question. So,
Yeah.
so something, I mean, there's a few key differentiators. Definitely, there's an approach to opening up the building, which would mean larger windows, right? Larger and a
Right.
certain type of window. So you're letting a lot more light into the spaces, right? We always try to get the highest ceilings we possibly can. So to have a lot of light coming in and a lot of clarity of that light in the space. So to have a space that has clean and clear edges, so you don't have a lot of soffits, you don't have a lot of strange things happening and in other angles and things that aren't fitting together, where you just think through the plan and the framing, and you can get a lot of clarity in the space. There's just kind of some basic ideas. And then, of course, it gets layered from there. How do you think about the lighting? What are the final materials that are filling up that space? The kitchen design, the kitchen materials, and then how things really start to operate, right? Because there's lots of systems in the apartment. What's the
Yeah.
bathroom look like? What are the tiles that you're using? What are the fixtures? How does that feel when you go into it? All of those details really make a big difference.
Now, how does that impact, or how have you seen that impact the value of properties? One of your condo projects versus equivalent condo in a similar area, similar square foot. Like, what difference does that make
That
dollars and cents wise?
that's a great question. So what's really from a development standpoint, what's the real value of design? I think one of the critical factors, particularly in what we're doing, and it's not what a lot of people would think about, but when you're selling condos, one of the critical factors is the absorption rate, right? How fast can you sell those
Yeah.
units? Because it's
Right.
a number of different transactions. So when people come into the units and they have a certain feeling when they visit the apartment, they're going to compare that to other similar apartments that they're visiting, right?
Right.
And so to speed up absorption is really valuable. That's incredibly valuable, right? Because
So
time
to
is
sell it
money.
faster.
Exactly. You can
Yeah.
sell it faster, and then that people will also become attached to it, right? We're selling to a lot of owner-occupied buyers, right?
Right.
And that's a different type of buyer than an investment buyer. And you get attached to something, you want that thing, right? Because it feels a certain way for you. So you can then work on the price when you're negotiating with someone because they get invested, they get emotionally invested in it
Right.
because they know that what they have seen and what they're making an offer on and negotiating for probably has a little more something than what they're going to get next door or down the street. And and then that's going to create some momentum in the process also.
So have
So
you
from
found
a
that that kind of helps you bump the price up compared to comparables
bump it
by,
up or maintain it, yes,
yeah.
and to also help with absorption of the units. So those kind of stacked factors,
Yeah.
and you
Now,
get people.
does it add a ton more cost to the construction of these properties? I mean, it
It,
can't obviously, but I mean,
yes,
what
yes, it can. I mean, if you're trying to build at the lowest price possible all the time, then that can just lead to other problems also.
Yeah.
Things won't work together. You'll buy this and you'll buy that, and then you'll fit them together and they just don't look right together, right? There's like a dissonance, it's like hearing someone play a piece of music and they're off key, right? Do you want to live in an off key piece of music, right?
Right.
And you see that all the time, right? So there's a lot of, it requires that kind of thought, but then yes, some of the materials and some of the other finishes will likely cost a little bit more, but it's really not about spending the maximum you can spend. You can spend a lot of money and get very bad design.
Yeah.
You can make a lot of bad decisions. So that's not the only factor. Sometimes there's a time factor too, if you want things maybe that are a little more custom, that might take a little bit longer. So there are some different considerations, and there's some experience involved in understanding the process to catch up on some of those things, which
Yeah.
sometimes work and sometimes don't.
Aaron, no, this is fascinating. And I think obviously design is a very visual thing. So if I'm not mistaken, you've put together a book for people about what you're talking about with design. So if people would like
Exactly.
to connect
Yes.
with you and grab a copy of your book, where should they go?
They should go to designdrivesvalue.com. Designdrivesvalue.com. And just a second, I mentioned a couple things within that book. I'm comparing some ideas of the value of design with some existing properties and why. And I think through those comparisons, you can really visually see the difference and why anyone would be more interested in something that just looks and feels a little bit better.
Well, I mean, yeah, you fall in love with the place, right? That's the whole, you instantaneously develop that emotional attachment that I
Absolutely,
really want, I
absolutely.
would love to live here. Like
Yes, yes, absolutely. And I think even, from multifamily investors or other investors that are doing value add projects, if buildings are improved in the right way, amenities are improved, apartments are improved with the right materials and the right thoughtfulness. And there's a lot of new things that you can get these days that didn't exist not that long ago. And they're also a lot more sustainable and a lot healthier and more energy efficient. And people really value these things. There's no
most
question
definitely.
about it. And they can really help, boost your ROI. There's no question about it.
There you go. Aaron, thank you
So
very much for being on the show. I appreciate it.
fantastic. Thank you very much, Dave. It was a pleasure, a real pleasure.
All right, everybody, take care. We'll see you on the next one. Hey there, I really hope you enjoyed that episode. And as always, if you want to listen to more daily interview content, make sure you subscribe. And if you're an active real estate investor and you're doing deals and you'd like to get featured on this show, then just head over to daveinterviewyou.com. Now at moneypartnerformula.com, we help real estate investors to create a process for predictably getting capital so they can do more deals without relying on hard money lenders or the banks. We do this by building them a private capital marketing system. Now, if you want help turning yourself into a big money capital attraction machine, then book a call with our team to see how we can help. Just visit moneypartnerformula.com to find out more. All right, take care, and we'll see you on the next interview.